No, not on the page. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Neeraj Kumar. I'm lead Azure Cloud Architect, and I'm also an MCT, Microsoft Certified Trainer, and I'm based out of US. Usually, I conduct Azure Talk on different topics, but today I have decided to take a diversion, and I thought it would be good if we can, have a Q&A session. So in past, I have conducted more than 14 sessions. So, I wanted to see if anybody has, question in general about Azure, which, I can answer questions for, people or, the people who join. So I will, open the floor for any question, and I'll take question one by one on Azure. So, if you have any question, please go ahead and, uh, post that in chat, or you can, speak up. Anything is okay.
So, hello everyone. This is Pavan. Hi Neeraj. Thank you so much for AMAQ. So, one questions I want to ask with you. I have 11 years of experience, and last few years I am working in Azure and looking for change. But every time, when I sit in front of the customer, he always interested to know about the architect level information. For example, how to think and how to plan, the infrastructure to move from on-prem to the cloud services. I never did in my experience, so where I am lacking, because I don't have a confident and good understanding in this topic. So can you help us to understand, how we build our understanding in the architect level and how we plan to move on-prem infrastructure to the cloud. For example, if setup is nearby of 3,000 server, 5,000 server, and the mixed environment like Windows, AD, DNS, the SCCM, SCOM, SQL, storage, networking, so many applications. So if many applications running in the on-premises, so what the best practice and solutions to move from on-prem to the cloud services? So this is my questions.
Oh, that's very good question, Pawan, and thanks for asking this. So, like, obviously, it's a very comprehensive question. Any customer, probably you will go and talk to them, they will have, same sort of question for you. So, there are multiple components that when you design, when you architect a cloud solution or a migration, when you have to work on cloud migration from on-prem into Azure, you have to keep into your mind. So it starts with, first of all, you have to understand what's the customer's end goal. Is customer's end goal eventually, does it have to be a hybrid model that the customer is planning to go for, or customer is planning to move into Azure cloud totally? That's one aspect. The second aspect that you have to be very cognitive, cognizance of, you have to take care of the subscription. So, like, how your subscription design is going to happen, and what's the customer's department, and how would you organize your subscription? Whether you will give out one subscription to each of the department, or you will have only one subscription, and that will be shared by multiple departments, and within that subscription you will have resource groups. So you'll have to understand customers internal organization structure, so that you can build your subscription design accordingly. Then third, you will also have to, so once you have decided what is your subscription structure, you'll also have to understand what kind of bandwidth is required while connecting on-prem into Azure. So, well, whether customer really needs an express route or VPN connectivity will be fine. So how would you size your bandwidth? Obviously, you will have to gather the question what kind of workloads is running on-prem, and what kind of workloads you're likely to move into cloud. So like, workloads like as you mentioned, do you have any Active Directory domain controller? Do you have freedom? Can you move Active Directory into Azure? Can we have a local presence so the traffic is, is localized, so authentication traffic? Can we move DNS server into Azure? Can we move SCOM server, which is your, management server for monitoring the health? Can we move SCCM server? Can we move, satellite proxy? So you'll have to collect an inventory of, their workloads that they are running on-prem. Plus, on top of that, what kind of workloads they are, willing to migrate. Are they willing to migrate all the workloads into Azure, and and then finally they want to close down their data center or data room, or they want to maintain a hybrid topology wherein they will maintain some servers on-prem and some servers in Azure. So that sensitive workloads can be sitting on-prem, and then all non-sensitive workload can go into Azure. So depending on what topology is needed, you will require a bandwidth dedicated. With that, so workload analysis is very important. Not only workload analysis, so that's from the infrastructure as a service side. Then you also have your multiple applications. So customer will have multiple applications which is running. Now, this kind of these applications could be intranet. This could be internet facing also. So you can have your application for internal employees, and you can also have application for external employees. So what kind of application is it? That's one thing. How many applications you have? The second thing. The third thing is, do you have budget? Do you have, ability to refactor this application, or do you have to move as is, lift and shift? So if you do a lift and shift, most of the time, organization do the mistake when they move into cloud, they move as is. So let's say today, if I have virtual machine on-prem, it's virtualized infrastructure, I move all the virtual machine in cloud. And if you do a lift and shift today, at least as of today, your cost will be higher than what you are, setting on-prem. If it is lift and shift, if you don't use cloud principles, if you don't use smart cloud principle, if you don't use auto scaling, in that case, your budget will be higher. So it's always good if you have budget and you can your refactor your application to make use of auto scaling. So like or PaaS services, which provides a much better auto scaling. So that way you size it for the time, size it minimum, and then when user traffic increases, you dynamically spin up the instances to take that increased workload, and when there is no user traffic, you bring it down. That's how you're going to save the cost. Automation, auto scaling. So I mean, these are the questions that probably I will pose to the customer. And what's the objective? Is it like they really want to go lift and shift? So I will warn them, if you go with lift and shift, probably initially you will have higher cost, and over a period of time, eventually you will have to modernize your applications so that it makes more use of PaaS, like PaaS Web App, PaaS SQL, or plus you will also have to modernize your application so that it uses SAML as opposed to Kerberos. These are some of the questions that and plus your application analysis will take a lot of time. So, let's say if they have 50 application, each application has to be analyzed and bucketed into, different category, whether, it has to be lift and shift, or can it be, modernized, or is it easy to move, it's difficult, or it's really difficult to move. All these kind of, analysis that you have to undergo, or maybe I would say infrastructure analysis that you will have to perform. And it's a very comprehensive task, and you have to do due diligence, because if you don't collect the right set of information, you may be designing something which is like which will set the customer for failure.
Thanks, Neeraj. One more question I want to ask. You just discussed about the subscriptions, depend upon the requirements. So what the best practice is? Single subscriptions is good, or multiple subscriptions is good for the infrastructures in Azure?
So it depends from your internal organization. So let's say if you have really big organization, and your IT is centralized, it will also depend on the support model. So who is going to support this subscription? Do you have your central IT to support this subscription and operations of these workloads that you're hosting in Azure? Or you will have your department itself, and they will be self-service. They will be the customers itself will manage, right? So let's say if you have internal IT and who will centrally manage all the subscriptions. So in that case, what you can have is you can have a shared subscription. So you can have a subscription for prod, you can have a subscription for UAT, and you can have a subscription for QA, and you can have a subscription for dev. Now, this can be shared by multiple departments. So you have department one, so you will create a resource group for each department. So it will be RG1 for one department, RG2 for another department, and RG3 for another department. That's one model where you have centralized IT, wherein one global IT will manage all the subscriptions and all the resources inside that. But let's say that's not the model that you have, right? And you have model where each department wants its own control and they want to be the owner of that, and they have expertise basically to handle that. So in that case, you will not go with the shared model. So this is shared model where you have your shared IT, right? Or a global IT. But if you have a dedicated IT wherein each department has their own support staff and that they will be managed, or application owner will have the ability to manage these servers or workloads, and they want the full control, in that case, probably you will not go with the shared subscription model. You will go with the dedicated subscription model. So therein what you will do is uh, right now you saw that we have subscription, and for each of kind of environment. So I have production environment for one subscription, and then I have UAT one subscription, then I have QA one subscription, then I have dev. That's in shared subscription, which is where I have a single global IT. But if I didn't had, in that case, this model will change. Now this model will be something like wherein I still will have subscription, but those will be dedicated to the department. So I will have one subscription for department one, another one for department two, another one for department three. Now each department will in turn either they can have subscription for prod, non-prod, and dev and QA. That's also possible. Or you can also within each subscription you can have RG1 which is for dev. Then you can have another RG2 which is resource group 2, which will house all the QA workload. Then you can also have another resource group 3, which can host your UAT workload. And then finally you can have another resource group, let's say RG4, which can host your production workload. That's also one of the possibility, wherein you give out subscription to each of the department, and then each of the environment, development, QA, and UAT will have its own resource group within the same subscription. That's one model where global IT is not shared, and each department has their own support staff and application developer, or the team will have full control over the workloads running in Azure. The second option that within this itself, in the shared in the dedicated subscription model, where each department gets a dedicated subscription, is you can spin up another subscription. So right now I told you that you will have resource group 1, resource group 2, and so on for prod, UAT, and dev and QA. You can give out subscription 1 for prod, subscription 2 for QA, subscription 3 for dev, and then subscription 4 for prod. So that's also a possibility. So depending on what's your IT model, what's your internal organization structure, the subscription design can change and it can vary. So any further question on the subscription design?
Thank you so much, Neeraj.
Yeah, Neeraj, I have a question.
Yeah.
So could you just help us to design a very simple application migration where we will go with a web app, and that is like from the app side we wanted to migrate it, and the database side will be Azure SQL v12, and probably we wanted to use a file storage because they are looking for the application availability there, where they are like a sharing of the data they wanted to do more file type,
Mhm.
as well as the blob. So can you just draw some diagram and help us how we can go ahead and do that?
So let's see if I understand. Your requirement is you want a web application, right?
Yes.
And you will have a blob storage. So let's
Yeah.
draw it, right? So you have end user here. Then you will have a web app. So this end user will hit and come to your web app, right? So this will be your web app where you will host your application. Then this web app is obviously this user has to be authenticated. So you will have your Azure AD, right, where the authentication will happen, and this will be over SAML. So all these user, either those identities provisioned, or or you have cloud only identity, or it's federated identities, or you can also federate with LinkedIn or Yahoo and live IDs and all those that you can also do. Then this web app will also be utilizing your SQL Server, Azure SQL, right? So Azure SQL, that's where you will host your information. So I don't know if you'll also really need NoSQL or Azure Table for storing any let's see non-structured data. So that component can also set and then do that. Then finally, you will have a storage account. So let's build it here. And this is our storage account. Within that storage account, you will utilize file, right? And then you will utilize blobs. So blob. And finally, you will have your storage access key, so SA key, using which you will make access and you will, store your information. What else? Anything else that you had your component in your application?
No, Neeraj.
So I think in this case probably the components that you're gonna make use of it will all be almost PaaS component, no IS component, which I see here. So you have web app, which is one PaaS offering. Then that web app user will hit the web app, and depending on user interaction, your user session information, those kind of information you can store it in Azure SQL, or you can also store it in some other places, like you can use Azure Table, or you can use NoSQL if you really want to store those session information. So that way, it's unstructured information can be stored there, and depending on user whose session. Oh, one more thing, if your web application is going to be a global application, so you will have two web app into which will be geographically dispersed. So let's say one will be in America, and one will be in Europe, and then one will be in APAC region. So you can have three web apps, and then on top of that, you can put in a traffic manager, which is Azure Traffic Manager, and your user, instead of going directly to the web app, will come and talk to the traffic manager. So the traffic manager, depending on what load balancing algorithm you have configured on that web app, will connect to the nearest, or depending on, so if you have set performance load balancing, so that means depending on user location, it will reroute user to the closest location. If you have set up active passive, which is like priority, if you have set the priority, it will always hit one, which is set as priority, active one, it will always hit active one. And if you have set 50% priority to both, then it will be round robin. So depending on what's your configuration, you can do that. That is Azure Traffic Manager. Then complexity will also increase when you go globally. You will have another SQL in the same region as you have a web app. So you will have another SQL 2 instance, and this will be geo-replicated. So you will configure geo-replication, and this, in case there is, and this web application will talk to the uh, the existing Azure SQL, so that all the data is in, you're reading from a single source. However, in case of DR, the web app will fall back to your second Azure SQL, which is configured for geo replication. So this can be typically like a layout of your application that you're talking about. And this file and blob storage, again, it can be, you can select GRS or GRS RA, depending on read access, depending on what's your requirement is. Do you really want this data to be available for some kind of reporting? So you will go with GRS RA. If not, then just GRS should be fine, because that will give you redundancy across Azure region. GRS is geo redundant replication, you can say. So it replicates, it maintains 6 copy, 3 copy within the region, 3 copy across the paired region. So Microsoft has a concept of Azure paired region. So every region has a primary region, and then you have a paired region. So if something happens, disaster struck in the primary region, Microsoft will fail over all its services to its paired region. So for example, America South Central has a paired region, North Central. India, Chennai, which is India South, has a paired region to India Central, which is Pune. So like similarly, they have defined paired region everywhere. So when you design your solution, please, and if you need a DR, so there is a difference between HA and DR, right? So HA is high availability, that gives you fault tolerance against hardware failure within the same data center. So if I'm using a PaaS service, I already have high availability. Microsoft guarantees that high availability. But let's say if I'm building a VM, so what could be a typical high availability scenario? So I should put at least 2 web app as a part of one availability set. So availability set is what guarantees you that server will be put on 2 different fault domain and 2 different update domain. So fault domain is where the physical servers, if something happens to physical server, your all VMs will not go down. Those physical servers are the Hyper-V servers on which these VMs are running. So Microsoft will ensure that physically it puts on 2 different physical servers. Update domain is sometime Microsoft has to patch its hypervisor plus its your operating system also. So in that case, Microsoft will make sure that not 2 VMs are patched simultaneously, so that you still have 1 VM up. So that will give you high availability within the same region. But let's say if your entire region is down, so you need BCDR, which is business continuity disaster recovery. For that, you will create your design with keeping RTO, recovery time objective, and RPO, recovery point objective, in mind, and you will utilize the paired region to host the DR components.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks.
All right, go ahead. Ryan, you had a question?
Neeraj, Lalit here.
Yeah.
I have one question. So, if we are just going and analyzing the customer environment or the data center, what would be the best tool if customer says, okay, they don't have any tool for the assessment to analyze their applications and to move out to the cloud, and apart from that, they don't have anything to analyze. So what would be the best tool to analyze the customer environment so we can get the data? Based on that, we'll just plan and execute the things for customer and architecture prospect.
So Microsoft has a tool called Cloud Discovery, which you can make use of if you have primarily Microsoft applications in your running your environment, and you are also a Microsoft shop. So you can use Microsoft Cloud Discovery, which is, I think, offering of Azure AD Premium, but you can take help from your existing relationship with Microsoft and get access to Cloud Discovery tool. So that will help you to discover the application that you have. But there are also third-party tools which are out there which can help you, which I don't have a list as such, but there are a lot of third-party tools which can help you to discover these applications. And in fact, Microsoft assessment application assessment tool, or the tool that Microsoft has, Cloud Discovery, it helps you to give level of complexity against each of the application. Is like what's the level of complexity is required for migrating these applications. So you can make use of this. There are also third party apart from Cloud Discovery, which you can certainly use it.
Neeraj, one question, Pavan this side.
Yeah, Pawan.
So every customer always concerned about the security because cloud definitely public interface. So how we can secure cloud Azure infrastructures, and the customers happy with that, because recently we have seen many attacks happen, ransomware and blah blah things. So how we can protect our infrastructures, Azure infrastructures basically.
Okay, sure. Before I take your question, so Lalit, this is what I was talking about. So you can find your application with Cloud App Discovery. So if you host that, basically what it does, it will collect, depending on how you have set up, but it will collect the information from your corporate laptops and users and the mobile that they're using, and collect that information and analyze that and publish it as a report for you. So that way you will be able to discover what kind of application your customer is using, or whether it's .NET application or any other application. So this is a tool from Microsoft, but there are some third-party applications also.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah, so neither prayers here. So just I was asking that what I understood about this tool, that it is only going to give the edge on today what is the status of the application or detail about the application, but it is not giving that where we have to take this application. Am I right? And what is the approach I am going to take?
Yeah, approach they will not tell you, but at least you will get the data. It will give you a journal of an application that you have on-prem running. Probably that will help you to categorize this application. Plus, also with the help of Microsoft, you can, or maybe with your expertise. So let's say you have discovered. So first thing is discovery, right? So this will help you discover. Once you have discovered, then you will have to assess each and every application individually to see what kind of complexity is required. Some application may be easy to refactor to SAML authentication, so you can refactor those. Some applications will not be so easy, so it will require some refactoring. Some applications are hard coded and it's very difficult, so you will have to do lift and shift. So those are the things you have to, everything will be driven by the cost of refactoring. Right. So if cost of refactoring is really high, and you think that moving lift and shift will be much better and will save more cost than doing the actual refactoring, then you go with lift and shift. So now let's come back to Pawan's question. So your question was around
security. Just I will take 2 minutes to add some words what we were discussing about the assessment. So because I have done some assessment, I have done it in my past. So what will happen that when we start with the assessment, first of all, we need to start with the architecture principle. As you have said, the multiple question we need to ask the client what they are looking for exactly. Like suppose they wanted to close with the data center, or they are looking for take the application to the nth version, or they are looking for the approach. Normally people they say the first approach will be SaaS, PaaS, public, private, and on-premise. So all these things we need to take a call, then accordingly we can decide at what they wanted to do. Apart from that, we need to take to that level also whether they are going to take with ARM approach, so that we can go and plan it, or the other approach they wanted to do. So accordingly we can take a call and we can go ahead and give a solution to the client. So always we should ask the question and have a understanding agreement needs to be get done with them. Then only we can go ahead and give the proper result to them.
Yeah. And also, Lalit, to add on to, Microsoft also has another tool. It's called Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit for Windows Azure. That also you can use it, which provides you catalog of all the application. Plus, it also gives you complexity level. So these, you can run. And if you have existing relations with Microsoft, they can also help you, to
Yep.
categorize your application.
Yep. That's correct.
Okay, so let's come back to Pawan. So Pawan, you had a question about, obviously cloud means something which is out of customer's control, right? When we host anything in data center, it's in our control and we feel comfortable. But it's really the myth is, though you're in control, you will require more resources, heaviest resources to manage and secure your infrastructure. So when you go into cloud, obviously one of the challenge of cloud is multi-tenancy, right? So the same hypervisor is shared by multiple users or multiple customers. So it's not dedicated for you. So that will always be a challenge in cloud. So if you have agreed that we will make use of multi-tenancy and you don't have any objection, then there are different security measures that you can uh, take to secure the cloud. So some of, obviously it will start with, you have two kind of security measures, right? Or maybe three. So you have data, right? So the data what we store in a cloud, that has to be secure. Then you have access to data that has to be secured. So these two, basically is key points that you start with. So data security, for that, you can have encryption at rest. Um, so Azure offers you ADE, which is Azure Disk Encryption. And then that is for the VM. Then Microsoft offers TDE, transparent data encryption for SQL, and then plus other products also support different kind of encryption at rest. So this is the data which you're storing is encrypted. So your VHD is encrypted using Azure Disk Encryption. It is applicable for Windows VM. It is applicable for Linux VM. That for Azure SQL you can use TDE, which is transparent data encryption, which will encrypt the data. For SQL you also have something called always encrypt, AE. You can make use of that to ensure that data is really encrypted. So these are some of the encryption methodology that you can use to make sure that your data is encrypted. You also have SSE, which is called storage side encryption. So anything. So right now, you remember we talked about the blob storage, we talked about the file storage as a part of the storage account. Now you can encrypt the entire storage account, and that is called storage side encryption or storage service encryption, which Microsoft is offering. So you can encrypt the entire storage account by default. So any data that you put in will get encrypted. So let's say if you create a storage account and you store a VHD in it, if you enable SSE at the storage account level, the VHD itself will get encrypted by default. So you can have SSE at storage account, then you can have ADE at the VHD level. So SSE gives you storage account level encryption, then ADE gives you VHD level encryption. So these are some of the security options that you have available for your ensuring that data is secured. Then you also have data in transit. So data in transit, so you can use TLS. So you have data in transit. So you can use TLS, so that is transport layer security, wherein server to server communication is encrypted. You can set up, let's say you have your web server running on a VM, and then you have a SQL server running on a VM. You can set up a TLS tunnel between these two so that data is encrypted. If you really don't trust Azure network itself. Then you also have transit from Azure to your on-prem, that you can if you use VPN, it goes over encrypted format. But if you're not comfortable, because VPN goes over public internet, in that case you can use express route, which will give you your own dedicated line. and which is a private to you, so that traffic is safe for you. Nobody else can eavesdrop because this is dedicated for you. It's not shared at all. That you can use. Plus, any website that you host, please make sure that you enable HTTPS. In fact, any PaaS services that you access from Microsoft today is by default and it's HTTPS. You can turn that on, and a storage account also you can set the settings so that it only accepts HTTPS. So HTTPS is like 443, which encrypts the data in transit. Anytime that trying to access those data will be encrypted, the data in transit. So all these measures and all these tools are available in Azure to secure the data. Then it comes to access, right? So once I've secured the data, but how do I ensure that access to data is given in a secure manner? So that's where comes RBAC model, right? Rollback. So Azure offers you role-based access control. So that can be, I can grant a permission to a user to a resource group, and I can confine that user to only a resource group where he can create his resources. Now this RBAC is not only confined to Azure, but also SQL also has its own RBAC model, and other products also has own RBAC model that you can use. You can use Azure Key Vault to basically secure your access. So basically, let's say if you have built an application and that application is accessing a storage account or a blob storage, so the keys, you don't have to embed those keys in a config file of application. Rather that you can store in Azure Key Vault, and from there you retrieve it at the runtime. So that's also a way to ensure that access to data is fully protected. Because if you protect the data but if you don't safeguard your identities, then it's of no use. So the data and access both goes hand in hand. Then you have Azure AD MFA. So you can turn on MFA, so making sure that the access to data is securely granted, so nobody has compromised your end user identities. You can turn on your multi-factor authentication when user is not coming from CorpNet. You can turn on MFA if they're coming from CorpNet. There's no MFA required. You can set up conditional access. So conditional access, based on condition, the user will be granted access or will be asked for extra challenges in terms of authentication, like in MFA. So one example is, very classic example is, if you're coming from on-prem and if I set your conditional access, in that case you will not be asked for MFA, but if you're coming from home and trying to access the application, you will be asked for MFA. So these are some of the security measures. Plus you also have, so these are at the user level. Then at the network level you have NSG, network security group. Using NSG you can secure access to the VM, access to the resources that you have. You can block those endpoints and only open the ports from one VM to another VM, which is really required. You can use that NSG. You also have something, if NSG is not is fulfilling your requirement and you need much granular control over traffic, you can use NVA, which is network virtual appliance, and you can set that inside your VNet, and then you can do that. So these are some of the measures that you can go and talk to the customer to build the confidence in Azure and how Azure can be secured. Right, and it's also about understanding what objection customers have and addressing those with the available technology that Azure has. If Azure doesn't offer it natively, there are a lot of third-party tools which can offer you, like in case of NVA, you have Checkpoint, you have Palo Alto, and then you have a lot of vendors which are there which can offer you much more granular control over the traffic that's traversing.
Neeraj, this is Uday. Thanks for elaborating this, all the components which is covered in the Microsoft Azure. So apart from this is entirely shared model responsibility in between the customer and Azure platform.
Okay.
But I would like to know, say this component, Transys, TLS, ER, and HTTPS, everything, NSG, or what are the components you said? It's responsible for Azure prospects, right?
if in case the customer is running a different platform, if in case they're given a loophole, any ports or else any mistakenly they're not properly configured in high standards, then for example, the DDoS or hackers can get into that, then you can wipe out the subscription. Then Microsoft can clearly say to the customer, so this is the loophole you given to the hackers. That is the reason here it's happening. So how can you avoid in such cases a DDoS effect or hackers or brute force or any other? How can you restrict here?
So yeah, that's very good point. In fact, I left out some of the technologies, for DDoS. So let's circle back on that. So I will just wipe it off. Before that, Pawan, did I answer your question or any ensuing questions you have?
Thanks, Neeraj.
Okay, so let's talk about DDoS. So that's very good point that you brought in. Like there are a lot of security tools which you can configure to make sure that DDoS or you're keeping off those bad guys out of your door. So some of the tools that probably you can maintain, especially what is your front end basically for your users. So you will have a web app. And then you will have your SQL server. So the common attack point is either the hacker will come because web app is basically exposed to internet, and then they use SQL injection to get the data from SQL. So Microsoft has two kind of tools basically you can use. One is it's called WAF. It's called Web Application Firewall. So if you front in your web app with the WAF, so your end user will not directly hit the web application, rather than it will come through the WAF. And that WAF, what it does, it's called it's a firewall for web application. So it will inspect the traffic and look for any malicious kind of query inside it. If there is a malicious query, you can say it's antivirus for your web app. So any and everything that's coming into will get inspected first, and if WAF finds it perfect, then only it forwards it. Now Microsoft has its own WAP, but it has limitations. So application gateway, app gateway is a WAF, but it only supports any web server running on a VM. But if you have web app, it doesn't support. But there are some third-party WAF which you can make use of it, and to make sure that it gets inspected even for a PaaS web app. So like in Imparva is one example. In my company we use that, but that doesn't mean that I'm promoting that. But that's one of the web application firewall that you can put to make sure that DDoS doesn't happen. Then Microsoft has something called for Azure SQL. It's called SQL Audit and Threat Detection, and this is offered as a service. So if you want, you can subscribe for this, and this will cost you $15 per node. So this is SQL Audit and Threat Detection. Basically, when this connection from a web app happens to SQL, this traffic will get inspected by Microsoft, the SQL Audit and Threat Detection. So ATD, which you have. So any traffic coming from the web app connecting to SQL will get inspected for any kind of SQL injection. So you have now two layered security. One at the web front end level, wherein web application firewall looking at malicious code or malicious execution from your hackers. Then you also have second layer of defense, which is for for SQL Server, which is audit, threat and detection, and basically it can block any SQL injection. That's one of the common wherein people go and steal your information from your SQL Server. So that can be prevented. That's from the the SQL side. Now from the VM perspective, let's say you have infrastructure as a service VM. So today what we do is usually people will have their public IP assigned. So some of the principles of designing a secure infrastructure is never assign a public IP to any of your workload. especially if it is infrastructure as a service VM, until unless it has to be accessed over internet. Even if it has to be accessed over internet, use load balancer, use Azure Traffic Manager to do that, but never assign a public IP address. So the question will be, how would I RDP into those for administration purpose? So you create your a Bastion host. So Bastion host is a VM which is fully protected, and that Bastion host has a public IP which you can RDP into it. Or if you're restricting your users to not to come from this admin, not to come from internet, you can even restrict Bastion host not to have private IP rather than public IP, rather than it will have private IP, and your users, since you're connected to on-prem using your VPN or express route, they can RDP directly into Bastion host, and Bastion host can ask them for MFA, and you can configure the Bastion host using RDS and all those. So that can ask user for MFA and making sure all the activity is logged, and from then Bastion host they can branch off to different VMs. These VMs don't have any public IP, so it is safe and secure. So the only entry point into your network is your Bastion host. Another security measures that you can take to prevent denial DDoS is make sure that you block outbound internet connectivity to from the VM. So usually by default internet connectivity is allowed in Azure, but using NSG rules you can restrict it, making sure that the VMs can reach out to public endpoints of Microsoft Azure. So there are articles that how can you achieve that by restricting internet yet allowing the VM to access public endpoints of Azure. So these are some of the measures that you can take to make sure that DDoS doesn't happen.
Right. It's these components only for DDoS. If in case any other vulnerability it impact the.
Yeah.
So what is the?
Sorry, I didn't cover that. Yeah, so that's very good point and to brought up. So Microsoft has something called ASC, Azure Security Center. So Azure Security Center is a vulnerability assessment tool which will assess vulnerability inside your environment and provide you a report. So you enable it at a subscription level. Once you enable it subscription level, it will report you into 12 different parameters, including antivirus, WAF, encryption, NSG, and internet access, everything that maybe I can show you what I'm talking about. So if you enable ASC, where it is, that will start reporting you onto different parameters. So it's called Security Center. And today, and if you come to Security Center, you will see there are different so it can report onto computes or networking. So if I look into my recommendation over here, so it will show you what all is there. So it says enable advanced security for subscription. You click on drill on that. Data collection, install endpoint. So the endpoint is not installed. Okay, then all this, so this will give you the security assessment about your environment, and will give you recommendations. So for example, if I go in compute, probably I didn't have ADE enabled. This endpoint is not installed. In my case, basically I haven't enabled the ASC. But once you enable the ASC, it will start giving you the security alerts and all the applications, everything over here, and it will give you those reports. So Microsoft has this, so you can see storage encryption is not enabled. So it is reporting onto me. It's saying server audit and threat detection is not enabled onto a database. Database audit and threat detection is not enabled on one of the database. So these are the recommendations that it will give you and tell you where you are lacking. And these are the, it's already enabled, so it's green.
Yes, Neeraj, can I add some point in this?
Sure, go ahead.
Lalit. Yes. Apart from this security center, you have an Microsoft Azure Advisor, where just it will look at all the logs, whatever the security and the threat and logs and everything to your applications, and it will just give you an advisor. And then you have an OMS where you just monitor, protect, and just help your applications and the VMs to monitor straight away over the your Azure infrastructure, and it will tell you whatever the Windows updates or the security measures you need to take it out, and that might be the impact which is comes under the advisor, Azure advisor. So you can take the major control, and it's a part of OMS which you just start deploying, and then you can work on this, and then it will even though show you the what are the older applications do you have, what are the security patches you might require, and what are the things has to be protected. So it just give you a complete advice to you to protect your data. And as far as I know, the Microsoft has almost 5 to 7 layers of the securities. Probably as of now, I didn't heard that much is affected from the part, much is affected the cloud infrastructure, and they will be monitoring all the infrastructure through Fabric, and no engineers or the even though the Microsoft guys they have an access and to analyze the things, they just using the Fabric or the other applications to just control the applications and know what are the data is coming out and going in, and through that only they just working and helping to the other guys. And apart from that, if you just protect your whatever the applications or the data you have the lock option. So you just lock it so no one can delete your data or can move it out here and there, or you can put the read access permissions over there. So just couple more things are there which you can take it in the majorly, and it will just use of it. Even though the so my point is that, I've just added my point here.
That's good. Thank you for adding on to. Yeah. So I was, I think Azure Advisor also makes use of security, Azure Security Center. So right now, what I'm doing is that, these are the protections that you get, basically to report you on to. So it will report you on to, and you can turn on and off individual policies, prevention policies. So it will report you on system updates whether your system is up to date, like ransomware is exploiting those patches where people have not deployed any patches, so it will report onto that. Any OS vulnerability is there, then it will report onto that. If you don't have any endpoint protection, antivirus, anything on those kind of things, disk encryption, if NSG is not properly configured, it will report onto that. If you don't have WAF, it will report onto that. Then if you don't have a firewall, it will also tell you vulnerability assessment, storage side encryption, and SQL and SQL auditor. These are the policies that it will report you on to all the resources, and it also give you a central pane of glass that from there you can enable everything onto your resources. So right now, I have, if I look into my recommendations, it will tell me all these recommendations, and I can go ahead and fix it. So right now, I've the 2 SQL Server, I have not enabled the audit and threat detection. So if I want to, I can go ahead and enable it. So from here itself, I can do all those things so I don't have to go anywhere else. From here itself, I can turn on this intersection. Another thing, very good thing, which Lalit talked about. So maybe I can show you what Lalit was talking about. So Microsoft has something called OMS, which is Operation Management Suite, and Operation Management Suite has a component which is which is called security and compliance. You can make use of that to perform a lot of security vulnerability and assessment. So you can also capture your data from Azure, bring into OMS, and then use OMS security compliance solutions from Solution Gallery to perform those kind of security analysis. So these are the tools that you can probably make use of it.
Thanks, guys. So I think I will do the deep dive on this. It's very similar to AWS Advisor. It's similar to that, I think. So I will look into it. And then these questions, which I'm going to raise to everyone who has participated in this. So I just want to know how you are justify with the customer the Azure products can give you the immense elasticity and performance and security and so on when you compare with any other cloud platform. Anyone can answer for this? if for instance, the company A, it's come to us, the company doesn't know about it. They want to go which direction, they want to pick which cloud platform, right? So in my experience, I can go and do the assessment and whatever it is, depends on the open source and what kind of technology they're using it, Microsoft products and open source, I measure it, I can weigh it. So which part is higher, then I can go with that, then I can design the architects, then I can slowly work with the business and conceptual designs and high-level designs. But how can you justify for this customer, because you have to work closely with the pre-sales if you do the design. So how can you justify for this customer we can give the 100% assurance to do all the functionalities in on-premises what they did, so it's everything it will be possible in Azure platform.
Sir, Lalit here. Just let me know if I would able to answer your questions. So basically, it's always depends if the customer is that much concerned about their security zone. Basically, just go for the private cloud or the cost host there.